In this release of Modeling Cloth Pro, we now have bend springs that function across sew springs. So to see how that works, we're going to just add a plane here and make it cloth. And then while it runs, we have our expected behavior. If we were to sew this together, and let's just go into the basis shape key before we start making changes. Add some sew springs, go into the sewing panel settings. And we have some sew lines here. And then we want to see this run in edit mode, so we go back to our current shape key. And then when this runs, it sews together, and you can see that the seam where it's sewn together, you don't have bend stiffness right there. But there's, under the sewing, the sew bend springs, and if we turn that up, then it will flatten it. And you can control the settings just like you could with the other springs. Underneath the MC main panel, we have stretch and bend springs, and the sew springs now behave very similar to the bend springs. One difference in the way that the sew springs behave, if we wanted to make a change to the target shape of the bend springs, so like say we go into the basis shape here, and we want the target bend springs to have this fold in it. The target bend springs, going back to the current shape key so you can see this, the target bend springs can support custom folds and bends and other things like that. So you see how it's maintaining the shape that we just generated. With the sew springs, it always targets just sort of a flattened state. So it'll always try to straighten this out here. And you'll find this most useful when you're sewing together a garment, because where the seams come together now, it will behave more like it's actually sewn together. So you'll get sort of that flattening effect that you would get with real seams. Another new feature is auto sew. So if you have something like this, which I've already run the process to fit it onto the avatar, but we can just reset that. So we're going to reset this, and this is its starting state, and it's basically the pattern with the sew lines. And then we need to set this to a collider, which is under the collisions panel here. And then you can set it to run continuous, but if you do that, then whatever velocity settings you have will be there, and a lot of times it doesn't sew together very well because it's moving too fast if you set the velocity too high, and it doesn't work very well. So the auto sew feature is something that I've kind of tailored based on my experiments to sew together with low velocity, and then it gradually increases the velocity and uses a more simple collider to run a little bit faster. And it's basically my own flavor of how to run the sort of the fitting when you're sewing a garment together. So underneath the sewing settings, we have this auto sew here. If I click auto sew, then it will use the settings that I've decided work really well, or that have worked best for me with the garments that I've used. And then if you amp up the number of steps, you can kind of get better quality out of it because it will sew together more slowly. And once it's finished all 50 steps, then it just goes back to your default settings, whatever you had before. So it's a feature that I've found really useful for like creating custom garments. Another feature that's really powerful and is useful outside of doing stuff with cloth, it's under the MC Extras panel here, which will get a bunch of new features in the near future. It's a copy armature data. So what this does is if you select one mesh and then another mesh and you click under these extras copy armature data, then it will pick up the vertex groups of whatever your active mesh is, that it's using for the armature data, and it will apply them to your selected meshes. So we can turn cloth off in this case, and now when we turn on the animation for this character, which it's currently in rest position, I'm going to set it to pose position. Now we run the animation. Well, since it's picked up the armature data from the mesh, the garment actually fits the character pretty well with the animation running. Now, it doesn't just do this for cloth objects, it will also do this for whatever objects you want to add to the scene. So this is really useful outside of modeling cloth stuff also. So like if I just add a random cube here, maybe you want to put a bracelet on your character or whatever. I'm going to put it up here like near the skin. And then we're going to do the same thing where we select that object and then we select our mesh and we do copy armature data, and now this cube in theory will also follow the character right where it was placed. So this is one way of like quickly adding accessories to a mesh without having to go in and like manually set up the weights. So a couple of other really cool things about this version. I've rewritten the collision system for object collisions, so it's quite a bit faster and more stable. And I've also rewritten the bending springs and the stretch springs, so you can get some really, really stiff bend effects. You could have your objects behave more like sheet metal or something if you wanted to. I'm just going to illustrate that with, I don't know, a cube. And we're going to subdivide this a few times so that it gets kind of a cloth-like effect. That's probably good. And then make this cloth, make this a collider, set this to continuous, and okay, so this is running, it's behaving like cloth. And if we turn the stretch up to like, I don't know, 10, we don't get any lag like we might have gotten in previous versions. And then we turn the bend up to, I think, 10, probably still will run pretty smooth. Get a tiny bit of lag, but you notice how stiff it is. So it's very, very stiff, and it's also a completely different solver, which is a lot more stable. And then this guy is set to collide, so if we turn the gravity up, we go under settings, and it's almost like a soft body effect with the way the stiffness is set. I've also simplified greatly and updated the cache system. So it's just a simple record playback now. You set your folder here to wherever you want to record, and it will just record and play back on the current frame. And if you let your animation loop, it just automatically records over whatever the current frame is. So I think that's about it for the new features that I can think of off the top of my head. Several other subtle improvements were made as far as improving, cleaning up the code and optimizing things. And I will release another video on the next update. So be sure to check it out. Links are in the description.